Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's video is on creepy, scary, and straight up crappy neighbors. I currently have crappy neighbors, but that's a whole nother story. Please hit that like button if you enjoy the longer videos, and I'll start making all of them longer if it's obvious that that's what you want. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. This happened 5 years ago when I was 19 living with my parents. We had a new neighbor who was super strange. She would watch us through her curtains and then quickly close them and run away, or she would stand outside smoking cigarettes, just staring at our house from her patio until we made eye contact, after which she would run inside. My parents started to leave for 1 to 2 weeks at the time to go check houses 3 hours away. My dad had just got a promotion, and I would stay at our old house. I would still catch my neighbor staring at our house, but I was used to it by then. Oddly though, I started to feel super uneasy at night, like I was being watched for whatever reason, but I figured it was just my nerves from being alone. One night in particular, I felt extremely uncomfortable. I really felt like someone was watching me, and I couldn't sleep. I called my boyfriend at the time and asked him to come over. He said no because he didn't want to drive, so I went around the house and turned on a ton of lights. I also barricaded the entrance and slept with a knife close by. I know, that sounds extra, but I was scared. I did this for 2 more days until my parents came back. When my parents came home, I explained what happened, and they thought I was just being paranoid. My dad started on some yard work, but then came into my room with my mom and angrily asked me if I had started smoking. I was shocked and said of course I hadn't. My bedroom window looks out into the yard, and my dad said that it was right next to my window. There were lipstick covered cigarettes stuffed under the siding of the house. Obviously, we all had a pretty good guess of who it was, and my parents installed cameras. Our neighbor watched them being put up, and she stayed away after that, besides staring through her curtains. When we moved shortly afterwards, my parents picked a house that gave us more privacy and installed cameras on that new house too. I still think it's super freaky, and I will never doubt my intuition like that again. The story is about a neighbor I had once been fairly comfortable around, but that relationship changed nearly overnight, and he started making me feel insanely uncomfortable to the point I broke my lease and moved out. I lived in the same apartment complex for 2 years, and across from me was my neighbor Sam. He seemed like a normal guy, a single father of 3. Over the 2 years I lived there, we had engaged in small talk many times, and I believed that he was a nice person. He felt like a father figure since he was twice my age and always seemed willing to help out if I needed it. Last summer, my region experienced an insane heat wave that we simply didn't have the infrastructure to deal with. It's common for apartments and homes in general in the northern US to not have AC. Temperatures were aiming to reach over 100 degrees, and without AC, we would all have to prepare to endure basically 90-degree heat in our homes with no relief. I purchased a portable AC unit, and me being from southern US, I didn't have the slightest clue of how to set it up, and all the online advice was only useful for windows that slid vertically. I had a unique dilemma given that my windows slid openly horizontally. After struggling with my AC vent for a while, I decided to knock on my neighbor's door for help. That turned out to be a big mistake. After he left my apartment, he started sending me text messages that made me feel quite uneasy. The first message was something along the lines of, "I could tell that we were nervous around each other. I'm shy. What are you up to tonight?" I was honestly grossed out and disturbed by this because it seemed delusional. I wasn't nervous around him at all because I'm simply not attracted to him, yet in his mind, I was nervous. I didn't reply. He proceeded to text me and call me every day and was even leaving me voicemails. He even blew me a kiss in one of the voice messages. I was starting to get scared because normal people don't continue to call and text someone that's not responding to them, yet this guy wouldn't leave me alone. I figured that if he was this unhinged, then outright rejecting him and telling him I wasn't interested could possibly be dangerous, so I continued to ignore him. If I was coming home at night, I always had a friend on the phone with me in case I bumped into him. I was becoming so on edge by all the unwanted contact that I called my cousin, who was a lawyer, to tell him everything that was going on. He asked me for my neighbor's full name. After looking him up, he found out that my neighbor was a convicted rapist. He had been in prison for 5 years for assaulting a 12-year-old girl. He was also able to find out that my neighbor had been arrested back in 1988 for armed burglary. These are just the 2 times he's been caught. I searched for a new apartment, and one with the easiest vacancy would be 3 weeks out. I had to wait. I went to the leasing office of my current apartment and told them everything that was going on. I ended up opting to break my lease and move out as soon as the new apartment was available. I'm so grateful I had a male friend over this particular night. The vent from my portable AC unit had fallen out of the window, and I was fiddling with it and trying to get it to sit tight like it was before. While doing so, I got another text. It was from my neighbor. It said, "I see you. You're looking really good tonight. Would you like some help?" Upon reading this, I realized he must have been outside and watching me in my window. I was shaking in fear. My friend saw how scared I was, and when I told him what happened, he went downstairs to confront Sam, pretended to be my boyfriend, and told him to stop texting me. I was so shaken up that I called out of work and booked the next flight to my home state to wait the remaining 3 weeks out at my best friend's apartment, far away from my creepy neighbor. I wasn't even going to allow any possibility for things to escalate further. Fast forward 3 weeks. I hired professional movers to get my stuff out of my old apartment. I was cleaning out the fridge, and my neighbor and I ended up coincidentally leaving our apartments at the same time. We made eye contact, and he licked his lips. That's the last time I saw him, and I'm so glad I moved. When I was 11, my single mom, 9-year-old sister, and 6-year-old brother moved into a beautiful older craftsman-style house. I heard it was around 80 years old back then, in 1984. Soon after we moved in, we found out that it was infested with cockroaches. I've never seen anything like it. You turn on the lights at night and they scattered from every surface. We had to store all the food that wasn't canned in the fridge so they wouldn't get into it. We tried bug bombs and professional exterminators numerous times with no effect. Those things can really survive a nuclear war. Anyway, they weren't the reason we lived in this house for less than a year before fleeing for our lives. I just thought it was an interesting side story. Anyway, I remember my mom discussing our next door neighbor's creepy son with my grandma. He was in his 20s or 30s. She had been doing the dishes one day and looked up to see him standing directly on the other side of the kitchen window, staring at her. Normally, she would have kept something scary like this from us kids, but about that time, she told us to tell her if we ever saw him near the house and we weren't allowed to play outside. She also told me a couple times that she woke up to see him standing over her bed, and one time he put a cloth with chemicals over her face to knock her out. This is the part of the story that I know the least about, since she didn't tell us until years later. I think she might have thought that she was dreaming, especially if he was drugging her. I don't know if anything else happened. I never asked her about it in case something did and it would bring up bad memories. So one afternoon we were doing some spring cleaning. My brother found a cigarette butt in the upstairs toilet. Weird, since no one in our family smokes. Being a dumb little 6-year-old, he flushed it down before telling our mom. I still remember her trying to get the entire story out of him, being upset that the evidence was gone, and thinking he might have been mistaken. Or maybe he picked up the butt somewhere outside out of curiosity. She soon dropped it, and we mostly forgot about it. I think it was a few weeks later. My brother was spending the night at our grandparents' house, and my sister and I were the only ones upstairs. Our mom's bedroom was downstairs. My sister heard a sound like the screen door slamming, but she insisted that it came from the house and she was freaking out. I told her it was from the outside and just go to sleep. A minute later, we heard a strangled cough coming from just outside our bedroom door, a man's cough, and it sounded like he was trying to keep from making noise. I whispered that we needed to go downstairs. We snuck out of the room, and I had the irrational urge to turn on the light in the bathroom, which was just across the hall from our bedroom, and check to see if anyone was there. Then, just as a strong feeling to get away from the bathroom and get downstairs now. The scariest moment of my life was when we were creeping down the stairs in pitch black. It was a spiral enclosed stairway with walls, the perfect place for someone to hide. The stairway light was burnt out, and the wood steps were creaky. So, it was terrifying making our way down. We got downstairs and woke up our mom, panicked that there was a guy upstairs in our bathroom. She started to tell us to go back to bed, but could see that we were seriously scared. She went over to the bottom of the stairway to go up and show us that there was nothing to be scared about. Then she had just as strong of a feeling to close the stairway door and lock it. She did, called the cops, and they found nothing and didn't really take us seriously. The next day, she called a PD detective friend of hers from high school to come over and inspect the house, remembering the cigarette butt in the toilet. She had him look out the upstairs bathroom window. It was a very high, narrow, rectangular window, not very big, but just wide enough for a person. Who knows how many times the intruder climbed on our roof to get in and went upstairs while we were sleeping across the hall. The window swung up on hinges. When my mom's friend let the window drop, it sounded like the screen door slamming. He said that the locks on the windows were so old that they were practically useless, and we needed to get out of the house immediately. We moved into our grandparents' house that day. When my mom went with her brothers a few days later to pack some things up, the back door had been smashed open, but nothing in the house was disturbed. A few years later, we heard that the neighbor's son was arrested for rape and attempted murder. I still wonder what would have happened if I had turned on the bathroom light, if my mom didn't lock the stairway door, or if we didn't leave that house when we did. I also wonder if it's still infested with cockroaches. Update. My mom got back to me. She said she only remembers seeing him in her room one time and felt like she was struggling to stay awake. Another time, she didn't clearly wake up but felt like someone was trying to get something off her mouth. That's all she can remember, so I did get the details a little wrong in my memory. No wonder she didn't think anything was wrong at first if she thought that they were only dreams. The cigarette butt was a clue, and what my sister and I heard was also proof. As a single mom myself, I can only imagine how freaked out my mom must have been when her friend told her that she needed to get out immediately. This is not necessarily threatening, but something I have come to think about a few times over the past few years. I was about 6 or 7 when me and my older friend were messing around in the neighborhood, doing random stuff, when we decided to visit a lady who lived in a house in the street right below mine. The lady was about 26 to 30 years old, and we would visit her every once in a while. She would give us small gifts like video games and makeup she had laying around. None of our families knew the lady, but she had lived there for a good decade beforehand. It was pretty late when we knocked on her door, and when she came out, we asked her if we could come over for a visit, but she told us she had her boyfriend coming over. So me and my friend parted ways, and we went home for the night. About an hour later, I was just sitting on the sofa when I looked down at her house and spotted a man walking inside her house. I didn't think much of it other than it must be her boyfriend, and I eventually went into my room to go to sleep. I wasn't really tired, so I went to just look out my bedroom window, which had an even more direct view towards the lady's house. I saw the lady stand on her balcony and the boyfriend standing at the ground. She had a shovel in her hand, and it seemed like she was yelling at him. About 5 minutes later, she goes down to the ground level where the guy is standing, and she starts beating him in the head with a shovel. As I watched it, completely frozen, she was beating him pretty badly, and the guy ended up laying on the ground. There was very visibly a lot of blood on the rocks around him, and he had on a white hoodie, so it showed it pretty well. I went and got my mom to look, and she called the police. It turned out that the lady had a long criminal record and was known to be extremely violent. Something a 6-year-old me didn't quite catch, so for Christmas I was dealing out Christmas cookies and cards to the neighborhood, also to the lady. I don't remember the interaction very well, other than me knocking on the door, wanting to give her a Christmas card. When she pulled me inside to come talk to her husband, a new boyfriend I'm assuming, who was sitting on the couch, the lady asked me to repeat what I said to her about the card to the man. At this point, I was getting scared, so I ran out of her house and never returned again. Definitely observe who your kids visit. I moved back home about 3 years ago. My mom lives in a trailer park. I had never had any problems with the neighbors. I mind my own business, and they mind their own. My mom's fiance, on the other hand, being the social butterfly he is, has tried to get to know everyone coming and going around the block. So earlier this year, we started seeing a new guy next door living with what we thought was just a single mom and her child. I thought maybe it's her new boyfriend or something. Of course, my mom's fiance immediately starts getting to know the newbie of the neighborhood, but the months to come, things start to get weird. Whenever my sister would go outside, she would notice the new neighbor, Chris, would fly out the back door and do random mundane things. She would notice him watching out of the window quite often too, but we didn't pay any mind because sometimes my sister can be very dramatic. My mom's fiance used to let him use our water and water hose to water his garden. I never understood why, but when we got our water bill back, and it was over $200, he told him that he couldn't continue to use it because things were getting so expensive. He immediately got aggressive and tried to tell him we're the ones that are using too much water, not him, which we've never gotten a bill that high since living here. Last week, I got a random friend request from my neighbor. Not thinking too much of it, I approved it. My mom's fiance lets me know that Chris talked about how pretty I was and asked him for my Facebook information, but that he had acted like he didn't know if I had a Facebook or not. The realization kicks in that he went through 100 of my mom's fiance friends on Facebook to find my profile. By this point, we've already been talking over Facebook, but it has been a friendly chat, so no harm. Plus, I figured he has seen that I have a boyfriend because my profile clearly states that I'm in a relationship. I mentioned to Chris what my mom's fiance said, and he said he wasn't going to sugarcoat anything, that he actually called me sexy as fuck. I let it be known that I have a boyfriend, and he apologizes. If you think that's the last time he made a comment or a pass, you're wrong. It's like he completely disregards that I'm with someone. He even asked me to go to the woods with him, meet him outside at night, and just in general made me so uncomfortable. At this point, I'm over talking to him, but one crucial information my mom's fiance left out was that he had just got out of prison months ago for some really bad stuff. Breaking and entering, arson, to name a few, and the worst one was manslaughter for shanking a man while he was serving time. He claims it was self-defense. I have no idea how he's even walking freely right now, but I digress. So usually once a guy doesn't take the hint of, I have a boyfriend, I'd usually tell him to fuck off, block them, and be done with it, but my mother doesn't think that's the best course of action. I even brought up ghosting him, but she still thinks that he could just walk over, and if he sees me out front and confront me about leaving him on red. He's actually been caught walking through our yard trying to find me, so her theory is not far-fetched. My family and boyfriend are terrified for me. My mom tells me that I'm no longer allowed to go outside by myself. I'm just trying to save up enough money to move away from here. Edit/update. Thank you all for taking the time to read and reply. Last night my family, boyfriend and I were outside on the front porch, just hanging out. We started hearing yelling next door, and the creepy neighbor sped off in his truck. A few moments later he came back and we heard the woman screaming, "Keep your hands off of me." Police were called and more people showed up at the home. My mom, boyfriend and I left to go to town. It was dark, but when we pulled up to the end of the street to go onto the main road, our headlights lit up a person standing on the side of the road. It was a creepy neighbor clutching his phone, looking up the road. Today I found out that he lied about being single and was cheating on the mother of his children. This poor woman has done everything for him, only for him to try cheating on her with 16 other women. You could say his dirty ways caught up to him, and she now kicked him out to the curb. He's no longer living next door. As for the commotion we heard, I know she owns all the cars they have there, so I'm guessing he tried to take off in one of them once she confronted him about all the dirty messages. She must have made him come back with it since it was hers, and he brought it back and tried fighting her. He must have known someone was going to call the cops, so he ran on foot given his record and didn't want to go back to jail, which is why we saw him at the end of the street looking scared in the dark. I'm not sure if that's exactly what transpired, but on everything I've heard from last night and from his ex herself, this is my best guess. To the woman next door, I'm so sorry that you and your family had to deal with this. You don't deserve any of it. As for the creepy neighbor, good riddance, and I hope you get what's coming to you. To start, I was 10 years old at the time, and back then, my grandparents used to own a whole apartment complex, and the leasing office was attached to their house in the complex, so this is where I spent most of my childhood. My grandmother would run the office and my grandfather would do all the physical labor around with the other workers. I spent a lot of time in this complex riding my bike, walking my Jack Russell, playing in the creeks behind the trees, like normal kid stuff, nothing crazy. I always felt safe around there, and everyone knew me as the owner's grandchild. Certain parts of these memories get a little foggy as I get older, so I can't remember every incident. But I remember enough to know that this man, well, something just wasn't right about him. The first time I met him, I was walking around the complex, doing nothing in particular, but minding my own business, and I see him. He approaches me and begins to make small talk, and me being friendly, always spoke back. He mentioned how he just moved in. His apartment is super cool, and he doesn't mind if me and my friends ever want to come over. Didn't think nothing of it at the time, and agreed. But things started to progress the more I see him around. Eventually, I knew something wasn't right. The next time I met him, I was walking around the entrance of the apartment complex, and to add, Mercer County Community College was right behind the apartment complex, so I used to travel over there, and you could cut through the college by the entrance of the apartments. I was only over there because the overhead bridge that looked down into the creek was there. I used to enjoy peeking over and seeing fish swim around. Well, once I was done looking, I turned around, and there he was, in the walkthrough of the apartment and the college, peeping through the bushes. He turns around and exposes himself, and apologizes for me seeing him like this. Of course, as a 10-year-old, your brain doesn't process things as easily, so I told him it was okay and walked away. He just stood there, reminding me about visiting his apartment, and that was the end of it. I went home. Now he started getting really creepy because the following two encounters I very clearly remember were the final straws to it all, and the little 10-year-old me started realizing this wasn't okay. I was walking my dog Buddy one day, and he sees me again and approaches me. He asked me if he could pet the dog. I was hesitant, but agreed, because my dog was very friendly, and I never taught him to be mean. He crouches down to pet him, and his penis fell out of the side of his shorts, and this is when I realized he wasn't okay. He sat there petting my dog and groping himself very visibly for me to see. I was appalled. I honestly didn't know what to do, and alarms were raising in my head. I stared at what he was doing as he asked me what I like to do, if I like to come over and play video games with him. I just told him one day and told him I better get going so I could finish walking my dog. The final encounter, I was with my best friend who was 10 at the time and my sister who was 3 at the time. We decided to take the dog for a walk. He was fun to walk with, very hyper, and would drag you if you let him. We were walking in the backyard of some apartments, and lo and behold, he appears, almost like he knew we were there, like he was watching us. He began to casually talk, complimenting my dog and asking us if we wanted to see his dog. My little sister agreed and walked a little closer as he pulled out his phone. I was fooled for a second and thought maybe he really does have a dog. He crouched down next to my sister and started showing her photos. As I got closer, I realized that he was showing nude photos of him and his quote-unquote dog. Then I realized he was groping himself and exposed himself through his shorts again. He was too close to my baby sister for comfort, and it made me very uncomfortable. He could have snatched her and ran if he really wanted to, and I always think about that. I was in a state of shock as I realized he was inviting us over again. My best friend realized that this was creepy as well, and we just exchanged looks. I knew I needed to get us out of here, so I bent down to pet my dog, and I clipped his leash knowing that he would dart away at intense speed. As he did just as I planned, we yelled, "The dog is loose." I grabbed my sister and noped the fuck out of there, and left him exactly where he remained, just staring. We ran home in tears to tell my grandfather everything I experienced since the day he moved in. I felt horrible knowing that I let it escalate so long to the point that others around me were exposed to it. The cops were called and he was arrested on the spot, and we had to tell everything to a child investigator, cops, the news. It was a lot, and after he was gone, reality set in, and so did the trauma. I swear the dog saved us and got us out of there, and I miss him every day, because if I didn't have him, I wouldn't have known what to do. I just think more so about what would have happened if I fell for going into his apartment, or worse, if he got his hands on a child that was 10 times more gullible than me. Fucked up part is, he only stayed in jail for the weekend, until his family bonded him out. If you're reading this, Giovanni, rot in hell, you creep. Update. Posting this made me search on him a little more. He's still alive, unfortunately. He moved it to the next state over to Pennsylvania, and his address and phone number are public. Apparently, he's a mechanic now as well. I'm a 28-year-old female. I have lived in the same apartment for 4 years. My neighbors in the unit above me are in their 30s, who have lived there for about 3 years with no issues between us. During the past 6 months, I've noticed some changes in their behavior. At first, it was a few days per week. I'd hear music with heavy bass accompanied by rhythmic jumping. I assumed they bought an exercise bike or something, but sometimes the jumping gets so intense it shakes my overhead light fixtures. The jumping routine has been escalating to the point that it takes place every day now, normally between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. I noticed that they called 1-800-JUNK to get rid of a lot of nice possessions. However, I figured none of my business, so I kept my observations to myself. About 3 weeks ago, everything escalated, multiple times per week, on weekdays, during working hours. It sounds like they're hosting a mini Burning Man event in their apartment. Their music is so loud and clear that it sounds like I'm at a concert while sitting in my living room. There's clearly a lot of people involved because the jumping and stomping shakes multiple light fixtures and cabinets. The music is a mix of new age spiritual vibes, dance beats, and a male voiceover giving weird instructions like, "Rebrand yourself, surrender yourself," with 2 stomps in response. I've taken audio recordings on my phone and one from the hallway during these events. I still didn't complain to the building, but I wanted evidence in case it became a regular thing. This week, I've encountered a big problem. The couple above me has a private patio, which is directly above my bedroom. I came home from a 3-day trip out of town yesterday, and my ceiling is legitimately collapsing in one corner. Big chunks of plaster has fallen onto the ground, and I saw a little water. I immediately called my superintendent, since I don't want to be buried alive by my ceiling rubble if it gives out. When he came to check it out, he was so shocked and pissed. He said the woman in the couple appears to be working with some people, doing workshops or something. He could see their patio from his apartment window, and he's watched a group of them do this dance, plus jumping, out there on a weekly basis. He says they all dance and jump to the music, and then spread out dirt along with something else, he doesn't know what it is, across the patio on a weekly basis. He assumes that the dirt plus the unknown substance combo is getting through the wood cracks, absorbing water, and weighing down the ceiling. To fix the problem, my super had to talk to the woman, check out their patio, and ultimately hire a contractor to pull up the wood and scrape out whatever the hell was causing my ceiling to fall. I can hear them talking from my room. The woman sounded distraught and defensive. When the super left, he called me and warned me that she might try to come down to my apartment and demand to see the damage, but don't let her in. This was a little concerning to me. Is she a threat? The damage is real, I wouldn't mind showing her. She started playing her music again, relatively loud, kind of like a warning shot. I mentioned the music jumping to the super and said I have audio recordings. He started begging me to send the evidence to the front office. It sounds like he wants them evicted. I said okay, sure. I hate to be a rat, but if I have to choose sides, I'll side with the building that dictates my annual rent price. He called me twice more that afternoon to confirm that I shared my evidence, and I said yes. Shortly after everything went down, I left my apartment to run an errand. The woman was outside just standing on the sidewalk. She stared at me the whole time as I walked by. I just ignored her. Now today, I went to run another quick errand in my neighborhood. When I returned, the couple was standing on the sidewalk, both of them this time, followed me into the building and then waited until I opened my apartment door to confront me. They both were wearing creepy fake smiles and started interrogating me. They asked, "Is your ceiling really collapsing? When did it start? Do you think it's related to the recent rainfall? Because our patio is just fine." I was a little uncomfortable. Were they waiting for me outside? How did they know that I even left the building? Why were they both standing there? I've literally never seen them together in the 3 years of living here. But I have nothing to hide, so I confirmed the damage is pretty bad. I just don't want it to fall during the winter. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but hopefully the work will be done quickly for everyone's sake. They seemed satisfied, so I said good day and shut my door. I'm getting the sense that they're nervous about what the contractors will find when they tear open their patio. What the fuck is up with this dirt rituals? Who are these people she's working with? I don't know what they look like or why they're available to stomp around on the weekdays. The repair work has started on both sides, but the contractor will come on Wednesday for the grand reveal of what's under the patio that is causing my ceiling to collapse. In the meantime, I feel like I need to be alert and keep my eyes out for these people, as well as the couple. It's unusual for me to see them in general, especially twice in 2 days. They seem scared and in denial of the problem. They also literally ambushed me. Hopefully it's over soon. The contractors came today and reported that there was in fact dirt and sludge visible below the neighbor's patio. However, thanks to the help of my internet sleuthing friend, I've gained a lot more insight into the realm that dwells above me. As one Redditor suggests, my neighbor is affiliated with multiple aesthetic dance communities, both international and local. The international group has planned events during which all cells of the organization host a dance session simultaneously. It also has a YouTube channel that streams psytrance music 24/7. I listened to a portion of it and a female voiceover declared, "You are becoming the Game Master." Meanwhile, the local groups seem to be more exclusive and more radical in their mindset. One of the local groups, hosted by my neighbor's good friend, conducts 3-day events that cost upwards of $400 for admission. Participation in all 3 days is mandatory. I get the impression that they all sleep in the studio space, and the vent description mentions that it begins with a ritual. The last and darkest affiliation that I've confirmed via social media footprints is that my neighbor and a few members of the local communities are also involved in some compassionate death groups. There's no way for me to verify at this time if those affiliates overlap in a meaningful way, so I'll simply state the fact that I have evidence to prove. My super asked me about the jumping again when I saw him today. He remains eager to act. He agreed with the new game plan to wait for another large event to happen, and then call him to check on my dishwasher so he can intervene. So for now, the ways in which my puzzle pieces of ecstatic dance, compassionate death, patio dirt rituals, and ceiling collapse connect will remain a mystery. Update. On Monday, the super came to replaster my bedroom ceiling. First, he said that the neighbors told the contractors she had a lot of plants because she likes to make bush medicines. She also told him that dancing is a part of her professional practice as a healer for people that were on bereavement after the loss of a loved one. So my friend and I weren't far off when we made the connection between her dance and the compassionate death affiliations. I showed him the new cracks in my living room ceiling that are growing in size and number by the day. He told me to send the video of the cracks to the building manager, but the management suggested I start with a handwritten note by their door explaining how their behaviors are wreaking havoc on my life. Since the super was working in my apartment and my neighbor was actively bumping music and jumping, I wrote a note in which I requested she reduce the volume of her music and be mindful of the intensity of her activities. I explained that the jumping or dancing was causing significant new cracks in my living room ceiling, and I offered for her to speak with me directly if needed. While I was reluctant to suggest this, I knew she might try another stalking trick if I didn't give her the option up front. So I sent her the note. After 90 minutes, my super said that he had to leave for an hour while the plaster dried, but that he would be back soon. Of course, my neighbor chose the end of this time frame to come down when I was alone. When I opened the door, she had the biggest fake smile and said, "Hi," then waved a note. "First of all," she said, "I want to thank you for your open communication. That is so important and rare in this city." Fake flattery. She admitted that she dances, which she has to do for her mental health, but she claimed that she only dances in the morning for 30 to 60 minutes, 90 minutes max. I knew she was lying, so I said her actions are affecting my mental health. She followed up with a range of excuses, including that they have been in the process of rearranging furniture, unpacking boxes, and that sometimes they watch movies in the evening with their loudspeakers. I showed her the cracks that were immediately visible from the doorway area. She pointed to one and said, "See, we used to have a table over there, but now we have two due to the furniture rearranging, so maybe that's the reason. We also have cracks in our ceilings, and we all have to share this space." I asked her about hosting any large events in the past month, which she flat out denied. She briefly mentioned that she does sessions, but didn't elaborate further. The following suggestion, I later realized, was entrapment. My neighbor said that she would give me her phone number, go upstairs, lower the volume, then I should text her to know if I could still hear it. Thankfully, my super came back while she was still in the process of sharing her contact information. She immediately tensed up, quickly gave the number, and then scurried off. As she passed my super, she randomly blurted out, "We're best friends now," referring to me and her. My super and I were both very aware of her antics, so of course, he didn't buy that manipulation tactic. I texted her that I couldn't hear her music now, which she responded, "So glad to hear that. Thanks. Thanks again for the open line of communication. I'm always happy to chat. Hope you have a lovely day," with the prayer hands and heart emoji. In retrospect, I don't think she was playing any music at all. I also felt like the conversation was riddled with gaslighting, misdirection, and flat-out lies. I was somewhat confused, but I know what I've been experiencing and have plenty of evidence to prove it. Within hours of our conversation, my neighbor started up the loud music and dancing as if nothing had happened. I was furious. I took new audio recordings and immediately emailed the building management with my new evidence. Footage of the cracks, along with a photo of my note. I explained that the contact with my neighbor was kind, though somewhat misleading, and expressed interest in accommodating my request. I also said her behaviors were continuing as normal, despite the false claims that she would take my experiences into account. The building manager said to keep her updated, but it was clear that she assumed that the situation would be resolved on its own. Nope. My neighbor continued the incessant bass-heavy music plus jumping the next day and the day after. I continued to document everything. On Wednesday evening, I went out for a quick errand and again was a victim of their stalking tricks. She ran into me as I was entering the building, waiting until I passed her on the stairway and then spoke up. She acknowledged that I probably had been hearing her activities the past couple days and that I would continue hearing them for the next few days, all due to rearranging furniture. She said that the coffee table had been sold today. Not true. I was working in my living room all day and would have heard such commotion in the stairwell. I said yes, I've been hearing her loud and clear. Shortly after my in-person encounter, my neighbor went to host a party. I heard people in the stairwell who seemed unfamiliar with whose apartment that they were even visiting, and one guest introduced herself as a friend of someone else. While the music was much lower, the group began to run back and forth overhead. Hearing these strange activities without the music was somewhat creepier than with the music. I took more recordings, then retreated to my bedroom, but of course, the group decided to migrate to their patio, right above my head again. By 10:30, I had enough. They were no longer dancing, but the group's chatter along with the music, a female soprano singing, was just too much. I sent her a text. I explained that I understood that she has every right to host guests in her space, but I was perturbed by the way she said to my face that any excess noise I might hear in the coming days was from rearranging furniture. I said I could hear music and the conversations clearly as the noise filters through my AC unit. I also said to please let me know if she was hosting events in the future so I'm not caught off guard. While my neighbor didn't respond that night, within minutes of sending the message, the group began to sing happy birthday songs in the most somber way I've ever heard it sung. I was able to record the second half of it. They sung in monotone, and there's no clapping, cheering, or any standard signs of merriment that occurred after singing the song. The following afternoon, my neighbor sent me a wall of text in which she continued to lie. She said that the gathering was very small, only 4 friends, so it didn't even cross her mind to let me know when she saw me earlier. She also said that this was the first time she hosted more than 2 people over the entire year. I honestly had to laugh at that. She said that when she first saw my text, they lowered the music volume and told the friends to quiet down. So she admitted that she saw my message, but made no mention of any birthday affair. As for the furniture rearranging, she explained that it had been part of a longer-term project, and added more lies like how they had just received the dining table and bookshelf that they had been waiting on for 8 months. Not only would I have seen a large package in the stairwell, but also why share so much irrelevant information if being truthful? Finally, my neighbor said that she would be hosting 2 more events next week. Another small get-together of 4 friends next Wednesday in honor of her partner's birthday, and a larger gathering on Friday, again for his birthday. Like I said, she made no mention of singing happy birthday the night before. Who hosts 3 birthday parties over 2 weeks? It was all false. She followed up 5 minutes later with a second text that explained she was late to respond because she had been in back-to-back sessions. So I finally had written evidence of her talking about these sessions. I didn't respond to that text. I refused to engage with her or her partner any further. They continued to play music and stomp around that evening, but I had my boyfriend and my friend over who heard everything and validated me that all of this was absolutely maddening. On Friday, I finally called my building manager to explain everything. She needed to understand that something very strange and potentially dangerous was going on above me. Thankfully, I was finally believed. It turns out that my building had no idea that she was running some form of business and hosting group events. I thought they at least had a vague awareness. My building manager said that they would get their attorney involved ASAP to review their lease contract and pursue action. She asked for all my evidence, including written communication, a personal written account of verbal communication, audio recordings, and footage of the ceiling damage. I've been taking videos of the ceiling cracks over the past few weeks to demonstrate how quickly they're growing. I made a Google folder that divided each category, dated every piece of evidence, and sent. I was so relieved. It felt like some form of action was finally in motion. I assumed that the building attorney was working on the case against them over the weekend, so I just ignored the relentless music and jumping. But today, Sunday, my neighbors have been hosting another gathering since 11:30 a.m. I've been hearing heavy bass, sporadic jumping, and chatting on their patio going on 7.5 hours now. While I've continued to collect evidence, I've decided to wait until tomorrow to check in with management. Around 5 p.m. I was quietly sitting on my couch when out of nowhere I heard the door open from above. Someone jogged down and pounded on my front door. I didn't move a muscle. The person on the other side waited for a minute. I thought I heard keys jiggling, and then slowly retreated back upstairs and shut the door again. Honestly, I have no idea what's going on. The music plus jumping increased after the knocking incident. Maybe they were testing if I was home, but I'm rattled by how I'm feeling being watched while minding my own business. At the same time, I want to keep laying low to protect myself. I still have very little information about this group. They're clearly escalating. 3 events planned within 1 week, despite the added pressure from everyone around them. About 12 years ago, my boyfriend at the time and I ended up finding a cheap, quiet studio to rent for practically free. Of course, we had to maintain the 3 properties there and help our landlord out with his meals and drive him out to eat, where he would also treat us for taking him out. The studio that we were moving into needed a decent amount of renovations to be comfortable and livable. It was pretty quiet and isolated on the top of that hill. Besides our studio, there was a neighbor across our driveway, about 150 feet away, plus our landlord who owned all 3 homes, located about 3/4 of a football field to the right of our studio. The landlord's girlfriend lived in an apartment above our landlord's garage. The landlord was extremely cool, so we got free cable, water, and power. We really only had to pay for propane for heat and water. The bill was to be split with a neighbor across the driveway from us, since we shared the large propane tank. We didn't officially meet our new neighbor until a few weeks after moving in. We all introduced ourselves and had a normal conversation. I got a chance to really talk to her. However, a couple weeks after our initial meeting, we stood outside talking for almost an hour when my renovations got brought up. I wanted to show her our great work, so we headed inside my place for a small tour. It was a studio, as I mentioned, so pretty much got the whole tour from just stepping in the front door. That's where the weirdness truly began. The actual first words she spoke upon stepping through the front door were, "Is that a used mattress?" while pointing at our bed. Now, if you know me, then you know when it comes to my beds, I keep them really clean. I mean, I like to straight up use a waterproof mattress cover to keep the mattress pristine with no stains and white still. And I only use good, clean sheets and blankets. So her question really threw me as I stared at our bright white clean mattress edge that was exposed as a result of me making the bed early this morning. All I could manage to say was, No, I got a brand new. We all had varying work schedules, so I really didn't see her for another few weeks after that. But then, the landlord's girlfriend pulled me aside one day with something pretty interesting to say. She told me that my neighbor had been telling her and the landlord that my boyfriend and I were known to have burglared houses. I was blown away. I wonder why she would say that. Neither my boyfriend nor I had even known anyone capable of that, let alone us being capable of that. The neighbor's daughter turned out to be a new cop and still worked at the jail for her first year. Supposedly, that's how the neighbor knew what she didn't even know. All I could really say to the landlord and his girlfriend was the obvious fact that we weren't even capable and couldn't even prove it, but we had clean criminal records, so we just dismissed it for the time being. After that, we started noticing dirty looks from the neighbor here and there, so naturally it was pretty awkward when I had to come over and knock on her door to collect her half of the propane bill. She gave me a check, and when I read her name out loud and looked into her eyes, I remember who she was. When I was about 16, so about 12 years or so before moving next door to her, I ended up at her house with my high school boyfriend for Thanksgiving. My boyfriend at the time's parents were friends with her and her husband, and they had a daughter who was our age also at the time. My boyfriend and I hung out with the daughter while the adults hung out and got drunk as they prepared dinner. I barely even remember interacting with adults, except of course at dinner. Yet after the evening, I was told by my boyfriend from his parents that I was no longer welcome back at his parents' friend's house. Neither my boyfriend nor I could possibly think of why. I found out a couple months later though. Let's just say I hit puberty pretty early and wasn't exactly flat-chested, unfortunately. That got me plenty of unwanted attention from the guys, even older ones. My boyfriend's dad at the time enjoyed staring at my chest and was pretty open about it. So no surprise that Thanksgiving night, as both men were at least very buzzed, they noticed my chest. Obviously, word got back to the women, and they weren't too happy. Add to that the fact that shortly before I moved next to her, years later, her husband had divorced her and she was quite bitter about it. I laughed at first upon reading the name on the check and asked her if she was the same last name that I had known in high school. She gave me a sideways smile and told me that she indeed remembered exactly who I was. That, combined with the fact that the landlord's girlfriend had told me that I was the only tenant that she ever had a problem with, told me that the worst was yet to come. It was just small things at first that we started to notice, like when I get home, I'd always hit the lock button on my key fob to my car, which would honk the horn to confirm that it was locked. Every single time I would do that though, she would always have her key fob with her in her house and make her car honk as well. Then, the landlord informed us that she requested that my boyfriend and I stay completely off her property and to not even knock on her door. But then right after that, she turned around and had our landlord ask us if we could come into her house while she was gone to set up a treadmill for her. She just left her front door unlocked for us to do it. One day, we had a friend stop by for a visit. He had a really weird look on his face when he came up through our walkway though. So naturally, my boyfriend and I looked at each other and then asked him, "Why the face?" "Well," he said as he sat down on the porch, "your neighbor, some woman, took a picture of my license plate as soon as I parked. Then she wanted to know if I was spending the night here." In shock and bewilderment, we asked him what she looked like just to make sure it was her. And yes, it surely was. She even took pictures of our license plate after that. She got really petty after that. She kept trying to keep track of whenever one of us would even step over the line to her half of the driveway. If she felt that we drove up the driveway in front of her house too fast, she would scream at whoever it was. That got me up in her face yelling one time. She even threatened to sue me once because, according to her, one of our cats was on her car and scratched her new car paint when she scared it off her car. I used a squirt bottle when I noticed the same cat on my similar dark colored new car one day, and no way were there scratches like she said. I mean, you could see on the clear coat where the cat's nails were, but it rubbed off just by using my finger. I started to worry about my 3 cats with her around, especially after one of my nosy ditzier cat wandered into her house after she left the front door open for a while. That cat disappeared shortly thereafter. My boyfriend and I smelled something dead around our property a couple months later after searching tirelessly for him, but we could never locate the source of that smell. Tensions between the 3 of us, and even the poor landlord and his girlfriend, were pretty high at that point. But it got worse one afternoon when I happened to catch her on my property. I was around the backside of our house talking to my boyfriend, but when I went to walk back around to our front door, I caught her. She was crossing back over our driveway towards her own house with this stupid, childlike guilt on her face. Believe it or not, it actually took a couple minutes for it to dawn on me that she had been sneaking around the side of our house to eavesdrop on us. Come to think about it, that's about the time I started hearing strange noises outside our window at night. Our mail situation was a bit strange at that place because there was only one mailbox for our address, which the 3 houses on the property shared. There was only one key to the mailbox, which the landlord had. The landlord and his girlfriend didn't drive anymore, so usually my neighbor lady would get the mail from the box for everyone and drop it off at the landlord's house so we could go get it from him. So one fine day, I trotted over to the landlord's to see if my check came in the mail. He said it hadn't come, and I could tell by just looking at the mail pile it wasn't there. It was a state check, so it looked kinda obvious amongst regular mail. On the way out of the landlord's house, she was coming down the stairs on her way back. So I asked her if she happened to see it, and thought that maybe she was heading back to the landlord's house, maybe because she had forgotten to give it to him. But boy did she explode on me. She started yelling at me that she had no idea what I was even talking about. I didn't understand her reaction until a couple months later. I started noticing that I wasn't receiving certain important things that I was expecting in the mail, like my new driver's license, vehicle tags for registration, and pretty important social security paperwork. So I hatched a plan and informed the landlord first. The second person I clued in was our mailman, since it was a locked mailbox. Since there was only one key to the mailbox, my theory should be easy to prove, and it was. My plan was to address the envelope as important and coming in the mail for me. I only planned to give it to our mailman at our mailbox, so it would be missing a postmark, but I hoped that she would look over that small detail. After the mailman put it into our mailbox, I just had to wait for her to bring the mail to the landlord and see if she left it with the rest of the mail like she was supposed to. Sure enough, when I went to the landlord to pick up our mail, it wasn't there. Excited to finally make her face some consequences for her crappy actions, I immediately called the postmaster to report the mail theft. But unfortunately, being the beginning of a recession back then, the post office were too far understaffed to even explore the case. I also tried calling the sheriff, but the mail theft was federal territory. I started to notice that the noises outside my window at night were happening more frequently. Not only that, but I started waking up during the night to severe stomach pains and diarrhea that were usually gone by the morning. This would happen at least twice a month while living there. Then one day I went out into the front yard to talk on my cell phone. There was zero cell service inside my house. The neighbor lady suddenly appeared on her front porch and faced me while holding her cell phone towards me. I couldn't figure out if she was just eavesdropping on my phone call or maybe filming me. But after that, she would do it every time I was home and went out to make a phone call. On top of that, it gets worse when Miss worries about everyone else's company being legit, recommended some lady friend of her daughter and her boyfriend move into the landlord above the garage apartment. Apparently, the landlord's girlfriend had suddenly moved out, leaving the apartment vacant. Now, you would think that a nosy neighbor like that, monitoring our guests, would have chose nice safe people to live in the property with us, right? Wrong. That young couple definitely wreaked havoc, I'll tell you. At first, they got into the landlord's house while we were out to dinner one night. They stole what I assumed to be the landlord's cell phone from his living room, but it was actually my recently deceased mother's cell phone that I had lent to him, since the cell phone had about a year left on the contract agreement. Also, some of the last pictures of my mother and I were on that cell phone. I didn't actually find out that the cell phone was stolen until my boyfriend told me as soon as our landlord told him. I remember that I was out in my field doing some tracking for Peeping Tom, whole other story, when he came out to tell me. I immediately yanked my phone out of my pocket and called the stolen phone. A younger sounding girl answered, but hung up after hearing me ask, "Who is this?" We both left the other house right away and headed to our studio so I could confront the young couple at their apartment. My boyfriend and I quietly crept up the stairs in the garage that led up to their apartment. As I stood quietly outside the door's apartment, I texted the number of the phone that I thought they had stolen. I did this because the particular brand of phone had a certain text tone exclusive to that type of phone only, and I knew that my mom had the phone set to that one text tone. Sure enough, I heard it go off inside their apartment. I calmly knocked on their door and waited for them to answer. When the young girl answered the door, I calmly asked her about the phone. Before she could answer me though, I explained that the phone that had been stolen was my mother's and she had just recently died. I also explained that the phone had a few of the last photos of my mom and I in it. She denied even having the phone, of course. For all of you that are reading this, I just have to say I tried, people. I tried, but I lost it right then. I yelled at her, "Bullshit, I just texted it before I knocked and I heard the fucking text tone on the phone go off in your apartment." My boyfriend was standing right behind me the whole time, trying to pull me back, as it was the landlord's house after all. As all this was going on, her boyfriend happened to walk into the living room area behind her, but as soon as he saw and heard me, he took off right back out of the area. She kept on denying it, and I was just getting angrier and angrier while yelling louder and louder. Eventually, my boyfriend had to basically pull me back down the stairs. Next, I called the cops since I had proof via the phone's location on the family's share map, proving where it was, and also my online account had all their phone activity recorded on it. The cops even sneaked up the stairs to listen for my phone while I texted it and called it. As I found out from the officers that night, the couple's place was searchable because one of them being on parole and the other one on felony probation. Although they ended up searching for over an hour in the small apartment, they didn't get my phone back. I even told her to just email me the pictures from the phone of my mom and I, that she could just keep the phone and I wouldn't call the cops or do anything else to them. But no, I ended up with neither. The young couple didn't stop there though. Thanks neighbor lady, all taking pictures of my guest's license plate for security and saying that they were a risk. For their next performance, the young couple again broke into the landlord's house but stole his car keys and his car this time. Our landlord couldn't even drive himself, so that was the vehicle that we used to take him out and around. The landlord's car was gone for 4 days or so, and the cops eventually found it ditched in a nearby canyon. Since the landlord didn't have the phone, so he couldn't receive the call to inform him of the discovery of his car, they had to take it to the impound to store it, costing almost $3,000. After all that crap, I still had to live there part-time since my mom's house that I inherited had no kitchen due to renovations. During that time, the neighbor for some stupid reason let her huge German Shepherd out of its fenced area as soon as my 4-year-old son exited my car there. It was a new dog to her, so I was appalled when it came running up towards my son barking and growling. How would you know how the dog would react around strangers, let alone kids? Thankfully, I moved into my other house as soon as the renovations were done. After I moved out of that place and got away from her, my diarrhea stopped completely. The landlord even told me that she had calmed way down after I left, even though my boyfriend still lived there. Nice peaceful ending, right? Well, not the hell as far as I'm concerned. It wasn't, because one night, I got wild hair for some petty revenge. You see, there was a gate about halfway at the long, winding driveway. I had noticed that there was also a chain on the pole that the gate would close to, and it gave me an idea. I took an old combination lock that I had around the house and straight up locked her ass in the yard with a gate and the chain. Since the landlord couldn't drive himself out, I had already taken him into town to get everything he needed earlier that day. I knew that he'd be fine and well enough, plus I knew he would laugh his ass off when he heard of my little misdeed. I didn't get to see her stupid face when she realized that she couldn't leave for work the next morning, but I bet it was classic. From what I heard a little later, she reversed her car back the windy driveway to fume to her landlord after she first realized she was locked in. He said it was hilarious, by the way. Even more hilarious was the fact that it took her like 4 hours to get someone up there to cut off the lock so she could finally go to work. My life went back to normal after I moved out, thankfully. The only thing any of us could come up with was that she must have been jealous of me after the thing that her husband said about my body back when I was 16 years old. Either way though, that was definitely an experience,